Thank you for coming to this study group, Street Epistemology. Today we are doing book club. This is the last chapter of How to Have Impossible Conversations. This is the book by Doctors Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. Chapter 7 is all about dealing with ideologues. Master level. 2 keys to conversing with ideologues. How to move unmovable people. In the section, Conversing with Ideologues, the authors define ideologue as one that is unwilling or unable to revise their moral beliefs. The authors assert that all moral conversations are about identity issues. Morality and identity issues operate invisibly at the level of emotion rather than reason. The authors mean this literally, with lots of references to Kahneman and Haidt, among others. In the back of the book, there's sections to other books, including Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and references to moral foundations theory, which we will cover here a little bit. I should have the moral foundations theory by Jonathan Haidt, which we will review in this summary. How to converse with an ideologue. When someone cannot provide realistic disconfirmation criteria for a belief, you will often see a whole big long list, redirection to other issues. They will not easily stay on any one topic. You will often have to interrupt and change the subject back to the claim that was made so that you can talk about just one thing. You'll find them approaching all issues from the same moral viewpoint. If you were talking about a claim about freedom and they talk about something about equality, they will still look at it from a freedom perspective, something like that. They will interpret all disagreement as a moral failing. If you don't think the way they think about this thing, they will think you are a bad person. They will be extremely sensitive and reactive. They will be hyper defensive. They will be overtly righteous. They will hold themselves up as virtuous because they hold this opinion. They will be unwilling to hear an opposing viewpoint. Blah, 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 blah. They will be disproportionately angry. They will be more angry than would be appropriate given the context, unless this were an important moral concern. They will levy unfair accusations on you and other people. They will use vilifying epithets. Think roughly almost any nickname Donald Trump has for anybody he disagrees with. And they will use weaponized moral language. Focus on moral epistemology, that is, change the subject to how they know their beliefs are true and how their beliefs contribute to their sense of personal identity. Here's a template. Acknowledge their intention and their values. Even if you don't hold those values, please give everybody the assumption that we all start wanting to be good people. We want to be good, and really, we're only perhaps disagreeing on what is the best way to be good or how to get to be good. So if you can acknowledge that their claim about freedom really serves freedom, or that their claim about security really serves security, even if that's not something you care about, it's good to give them some positive feedback. Change the subject to underlying values. There they are. These are the these are the six values that Jonathan Haidt suggests are very predictive of values that travel together. By the way, these have I'll come back to that. Invite deeper conversation about those underlying values. Induce doubt by helping them question how they derive their moral beliefs. Look for the process. And then, very importantly, allow them to finish on their own. Let me break down these steps. Acknowledge. This goes back to assuming good intentions and saying that you see that in your conversation partner. This lowers their defenses because you acknowledge that you recognize that they either see themselves as a moral pillar or someone trying to do and be better than they see themselves. If the person holds especially extreme beliefs, this little bit of affirmation can enable moderating their views. Even if you find their views abhorrent, you can say something simple without going into any detail about why they see themselves as a good person. Change the subject to underlying values. This is where you find out what values support their beliefs. Say, these beliefs seem really important to you. What are you basing them on? Extreme, staunch beliefs do not materialize from nothingness or exist floating without a foundation. There is something under there, or they wouldn't be taking an extreme position. It might be about what a good American ought to believe rather than the actual topic. Gently dig a little deeper into what they are motivated by rather than just the surface topic of conversation. What values, this is a question you could pose, what values would have to change for your view to no longer be true? Or perhaps, what conditions would have to be different? What conditions would have to be different for your belief to be false? Ah, she did. She touched my microphone level. One of my birds just crossed the very, very. Now, invite a deeper conversation about the underlying values. When you've discovered the values that inform their beliefs, you can explore those a little deeper with them. These goals are the goals are here to help your conversation partner state those values clearly and where those values come from and how those values are true and how those values relate to a sense of identity. If anybody would like to read this section, or I will, these are questions from page 164 of the Orange Book and 165 showing up. I'm going to go ahead and read for now. There's two other places where I might ask for other readers. I'd like to learn more about what you think makes someone a good person. How does someone know that acting in that way makes them good? What if they acted that way for a different reason? What attributes define good people? Is it how they think or act or both? Do good people think about things in a certain way? How does, insert whatever belief, relate to being a good person? What if a person believes that for a different reason? Are they still a good person? Which values motivate you to feel this way and believe that? Do you think that you'd be a less moral person if you abandoned that belief? If so, why? Should someone who doesn't hold that belief be judged as less moral than you if you hold that belief? Why? Could it be that they're just mistaken and not immoral? How would you interpret an example of a person who you know is a good moral person who does not hold that belief, or one who holds the opposite of that belief? What if someone holds a similar conclusion, but they arrived at it by different means? Would they be correct? For example, what if someone believes restricting firearm sales to felons is bad because they're a felon? Induce doubt in their moral epistemology. Moral epistemology refers to how we arrive at moral beliefs, how we arrive at beliefs about how we should behave and what it means to be a good person. Not many people think about how they arrived at their answers about what they should value. It seems in my experience that most people come to their conclusions about what they think through copying um, authority figures, repeating what their parents said, going along with the team, and other relatively quick jump to an answer kind of modes of thinking, as opposed to the slow first principles thinking that is encouraged when we're talking about moral conclusions. Many of us rely on moral intuition, society, family, and other influences to form our moral beliefs instead of carefully considering the meaning of fairness, justice, truth, or loyalty. This leads to a brittleness in moral epistemology, and this will allow you to introduce doubt. 5. Allow the tether between the moral epistemology and the moral conclusion to sever on its own. Do not rush it. Don't try to keep the conversation going until it happens, things like that. Once you've called into question how your partner arrived at their conclusion, let the conversation rest, and then let them process on their own schedule. You can also revisit the confidence scale to find out if it has moved. Don't expect drastic changes immediately. Oftentimes, changes can happen and they won't be reported, or changes are much more likely to happen in between a lincus than during. It really puts somebody on the spot for them to admit to you that they changed your mind, or that you changed their mind, or one of those. Caution, big caution sign here. You are discussing intense beliefs with deep roots in their sense of self. This is easier talked about than done. There will be fallout for the interlocutor. These are deeply ingrained beliefs about who they are as in. Some of the things that can happen is that they become angry with you, defensive, lost, or desperate. In some cases, you might even lose their friendship. If change happens, it will happen slowly. Give them time to adjust. Build golden bridges for chapter 4s. Build golden bridges and praise them for reconsidering their moral beliefs. Now, this is not about saying, and you should change your moral beliefs. No, no. It's the praise is for reconsidering, for being willing to potentially change if they find a good reason to. It has to happen on their side. If they are allowed to reconsider their own viewpoints on their own terms, the change is much more likely to stick. Okay, the next tweet. Would somebody like to read the next reading, starting with the tweet that says on August 20, 2018?
Sure.
Thank you. Go ahead.
On August 20th, 2018, President Trump tweeted, "It is outrageous that poisonous synthetic heroin fentanyl comes pouring into the US postal system from China. We can and must end this now. The Senate should pass the STOP Act and firmly stop this poison from killing our children and destroying our country. No more delay."
This tweet was brought to moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt's attention by Connor Frersdorf, a staff writer at The Atlantic. Haidt responded, "Wow, this appeal hits the sanctity button, that's poison seeping in. Loyalty, that's us versus them. Authority, leaders must protect. And even care, the children, the kids. This is a rare foundational appeal. President Trump's tweet was, in other words, appealing to an unusually wide range of foundational moral values and accompanying moral intuition. Understanding moral intuitions. Think of moral intuitions as tendencies to lean toward certain core values, sanctity of life, freedom, safety, purity, rather than others. Okay, am I back?
You're back.
I just had a little reset there. Good. I'm not sure where you heard me last. Think of moral intuitions as tendencies to lean toward certain core values, sanctity of life, freedom, safety, purity, rather than others. Our moral intuitions are formed before we try to figure out what's the right thing to do, what's not, and how we know our intuitions are justified. That is, moral epistemology. In politics, for example, liberals, conservatives, and libertarians often talk past one another by failing to understand each other's moral impulses. Jonathan Haidt's research showed that this is because different groups have different moral intuitions. His research is critical to understanding how liberals who want to reach conservatives should make their points according to conservative values, and vice versa. The same goes for either side wishing to communicate with the libertarians. Moral foundations. These are these 6 foundations, as described by Jonathan Haidt, and I'm forgetting the name of his research partner. It's in the back. Are care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity versus degradation. The sanctity is often called purity, and liberty versus oppression. I'm reading them in a different order than is on our chart, and I think the order doesn't matter at all. It's just that these 6 were boiled down in their research and polling to be about the most predictive 6 that they could get that would allow them in the Western world to predict what other values people had. So this is one of those boil it down after a whole lot of polls kind of selection. It used to be 5 and now it's 6. And the authors recognize this may not be a complete list. It's just that this list has decent predictive power inside Western societies. Notably, outside Western societies, it does not have good predictive power. I note that that is the same case as the Dunning-Kruger studies, which apply generally across the Western world, but don't apply in China, for example. Haidt's research into political tribes leads him to see that conservatives use all 6 of these, almost balanced, with an emphasis on loyalty, authority, and sanctity or purity. That word back. Liberals strongly are concerned about care, fairness, and liberty, and are much less concerned about loyalty, authority, purity. Libertarians are liberty first and all the others are secondary. Reframing. People from different religions or political viewpoints might use different words for the same idea and might use the same words for different ideas. Learning what a group usually means by a term is very helpful in conversing with them. Here's how. Expose yourself to people that hold alternate views. This is easier with slightly different viewpoints rather than going for the opposite extreme. It would be very, very difficult for me to, for example, go listen to Rush Limbaugh a lot just to listen to how they think or something. That's not going to work out for me. I'm going to spend all my time just bristling. But if I could listen to somebody moderate, for the record, I'm slightly left. If I could listen to somebody closer to the center or a little right of me, that's going to be a lot easier for me than if I'm trying to go listen to somebody from the very far extreme. In the book, they say live is better than remote, but now 2020 just called in high def video and left the message remote is good enough, especially in video. Actually, it's okay. Remote is good. Make friends outside your moral belief tribe. Home in on terms that are specific to a moral viewpoint, like faith is opposed to trust. Sorry, terms outside your moral viewpoint, like faith, as opposed to trust, hope, or confidence, as an example, or equity versus equality. There's a subtle distinction there. Evidences versus evidence. In scientific circles, evidence is like data, both plural and singular. Yeah, I know there's the exception. Datum can be a singular piece of data, but almost always data is used for both the plural and singular. And I find evidences to be used by apologists almost exclusively and not used outside of religious conversations, it seems. Spiritual versus social, musical, emotional, experiential, transcendent, or chemically volatile, all of which are legitimate other ways to say spiritual. And spiritual is almost the least defined term you can get to. So when somebody uses it, get a definition of spiritual if you can, because it's really unlikely to be what you precisely predict. Sorry, precisely predict. In Catholic English, it's host. In Protestant English, it's cracker or wafer. Listen to your own moral dialect like an outsider. Identify the way you use a word and compare it to the way others use it. Ask yourself what you mean by the word and what someone who disagrees with you means by it. I'm going to read a list kind of slow. Racist, feminist, ageist, ableist, atheist, skeptic, religion, patriot, freedom, rights, and how about violence? And again, the authors suggest you read Dr. Height. I think that's a great idea. If we do another book club soon, I am I'm strongly inclined to use a Dr. Height book. How to reframe a conversation morally. For a conservative, use the terms leadership, freedom, family, and responsibility. For a liberal, the disadvantaged, the poor, victims, harm. For both sides, liberty, decency, morals, equity, equality, ooh, and fairness. When you're up against somebody using terms and they say, well, faith is just like trust, and I have trust in or something. Can you think of a sentence where term X could be used rather than term Y and the meaning of the sentence would not change? If no, then why use X? If yes, then try out the sentence to see if X and Y are actually synonyms. Even if you don't make progress, moral disagreements are opportunities to learn a different moral language. Clearly, in a case where you're dealing with an ideologue, your chances of success in changing their mind are necessarily very low. So, if you don't see that as your goal, if you simply see, I want to go into this conversation ending on good rapport and perhaps learn some better moral language for further conversations with people with similar values, much better. And the conclusion to chapter 7 is plenty good and easier for me to read than to summarize, so here goes. Seemingly impossible conversations typically have one thing in common: they are about moral belief rooted in one's sense of identity, but they play out on the level of facts or assertions, name calling, grandstanding, threats, etc. That is, the discussion appears to be about issues, maybe Muslim immigration, or ideas defending Western values, however those are understood from Muslim immigrants, and facts, maybe numbers of immigrants from Islamic countries. But instead, it's really about the type of person the entrenched individual perceives themselves to be. I am a good person, and good people believe this. The most difficult conversations, then, masquerade as discussions about something other than morality, but they are actually about what qualities, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors individuals believe make them good people or bad people, and why it is important to hold the right views among those. Moral conversations are extremely difficult to navigate because moral beliefs are closely tied to issues of personal identity and community. That is, how one views oneself, what type of person one thinks one is, and how the participants in the conversation fit in with others in groups composed of members they esteem, they value. Members whose esteem they value. The added burdens of people thinking it's a virtue to not change their minds while belonging to communities that reinforce their beliefs makes shifting their ideas in this area nearly impossible. Colloquially, an unwillingness or inability to change one's mind is called incorrigibility. Philosophically, it's termed epistemic closure or doxastic closure. And in other domains, like religion and pop morality, it's known as conviction. People often think moral issues are clear, with obvious answers, until their moral epistemology is challenged by targeted questions. At that point, the dizzying complexity can become overwhelming. When faced with this, individuals who are otherwise reasonable and well meaning may shut off, hunker down, or claim offense. So, take it slow. Failure to appreciate this complexity contributes to widespread, unwarranted moral certainty, which prevents a culture from emerging in which we are capable of understanding different moral epistemologies. Most of these problems can be bypassed by using the techniques, strategies, and approaches described in this chapter. And then the overall conclusion of the book. You now have the tools to speak your mind, understand, and be understood. You are empowered to navigate even the most difficult conversations. But you must use what you've learned. The techniques of the previous chapters will be worthless unless you practice. Along the way, expect failure and success. The successes will emerge because you've persisted. Some of the techniques in this book will become your conversational bread and butter. As you improve, we urge revisiting less used sections and incorporating more techniques. Once you've grasped all the techniques from beginner to master level, you will be equipped to rise confidently to conversational challenges. That said, there's no urgency. Start slowly. Build your repertoire. Pay attention to what works and what doesn't, and keep practicing. Keep talking, keep listening, and keep learning. Above all, take charge. There's no reason to cower, to be afraid to voice your opinion, or to fear disagreement. You know how to engage people with proven, evidence-based techniques. All that's left is for you to begin. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, Gigi, for helping me prepare this summary over the several last weeks. I'd like to open it up to the room. If anybody has any comments or conversation that they would like to add, please throw in.
I just want to say thanks again, Dolly, for doing the series. This was very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I find it interesting the part about those getting angry and upset when questioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am feeling, it's taking a long time, but I am feeling better very slowly, a little bit at a time. And my chest is.
I think that's someone in the background somewhere.
Yeah, Willow, I can just barely hear that you're speaking, but I'm not getting all your words.
I felt better, and I've just gone back into.
Just slightly.
I get worse again.
I'm not really sure. It's very quiet.
I don't think that Willow was talking to us.
Ah, I see.
But truthfully, I don't know what it is. 100%. I really feel like.
Well, he's gone.
Okay. Thank you, Pasta Mike. He said, excellent topic when well read. I'm glad I tuned in. Heading to a meeting now. Much love. Yes, much love, Pasta Mike. Thank you. Thank you. We love tart round here. I love tart stuff. Yes, and FK definitely is the best. This show could not possibly happen without FK being our producer. It's really making it happen. So, if nobody else has anything to add, thank you all for coming. I really enjoyed doing this particular book club. I've suspended the book clubs for the next few weeks. I'm going to be focusing very hard on live park stuff. And then once that gets settled in, I'll consider resuming book club. Here are 5 of my favorite SE specific channels. This is out of a list of a baker's dozen or so that we have on the YouTube channel under promoted channels. If you are really into this topic of street epistemology, my favorite place where resources are gathered is streetepistemology.com, brought by Street Epistemology International, who is a very appreciated supporter of this show. Thank you all for coming to this study group of street epistemology, this book club that we've had. If you would like to be a guest on my show on anything related to street epistemology, whether you're for it, against it, you want to form it, you want to do questioning, you want to be questioned, you want to talk about it, you want to raise your fist and yell and scream about it, that's all fine. We have a category for you. If that's the case, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.